My friend asked me, so why can't India and Pakistan get together? And I said, oh boy, where do you want me to start? I went through about an hour of modern Indian history with him, and then all the intricacies of why partition happened and what happened after that contributed to the problems that are between India and Pakistan. But I'm not going to take all that time today. This is very brief. This is a distillation of my thoughts. And you're going to hear from me today. My name is Abdul, as you guys heard. I'm a resident in pathology in Houston, and I am at work. I mean, I'm not being called for anything right now, but yes. So I'm going to talk about the Never-Ending Partition and the Trail of Tears. I will use a few maps because I love maps, and I feel like they enhance this story. So just to just to clear my qualifications, this is a book that I was a contributor to. This is the chapter 14. I wrote that. I'm not going to talk about that in detail today. That's a topic for a different day. So this is how India and Pakistan stand today. This is a map of India, Pakistan. You can see a little bit of, can you guys see my mouse? Okay, good. So this is Bangladesh. This is Bangladesh, which used to be East Pakistan back in 1947. Pakistan, India, and then a little bit of Afghanistan, and this is where China is. So this is modern day. This is a map of India around 1760. That's when India was divided into different little parts. Some of them were ruled by, initially I would say this part. So this is where this part used to be ruled by Mughals, the Mughal dynasty that ruled India from somewhere between the 15th century to sometime between the mid 18th century. And then this was Marhatas, and then there was a little state here. Mysore had a separate ruler, and then Bengal had its own rule. Punjab, or what eventually became Pakistan, this was also fragmented into different little states. And then the British arrived. So this is a map of how the British takeover of India took place. It started as the British came as traders, as the British East India Company. And initially, it started with Bengal. Bengal was the first state that they basically conquered in 1767. And then they eventually moved on from Bengal to, as you could see, they're going south and they're going north in this direction. And then eventually, except this green part, all the blue that you see on the screen, this was all under British control. And this green parts, these were small states. They were called princely states. So they were semi-autonomous states that had like a little degree of autonomy from the British, but they were nominally independent. They were not completely independent. They didn't have their own like foreign policy or currency or whatever. So they were present. And this is 1858. And this map remained until 1947. So about a 90-year period after this one. This is a proposal that was presented in 1934 by a Muslim student at Cambridge. He thought that areas where there was a Muslim majority in British India, they should form their own state. And he picked out these little areas which should form one state. I'm not entirely sure what he had in mind, like how to connect these, but that was just a student's fever dream, I would say. And then he named them different names, obviously. This is what's today and previously known as Hyderabad. He wanted to call it Usmanistan and other places. So this was a provisional map drawn by a student. But at the time in 1934, no one really gave it much credence, and this is more of an interest to historians today than anyone else. So this is a very, very brief timeline of people who were ruling over India. Mughals until roughly the 1770s. Mughal ruled over the area that I showed you, the northern India area, until the 1770s. And then the East India Company was ruling over big chunks of India till 1857. And then following 57, the British Raj formally took over India. And the East Indian Company it's a very interesting, William Dalrymple's recent book, I think it's called The Anarchy. It deals with the East India Company. And if you want more details, you can read in the book. So this is a question, you guys can put it in chat. Which of these characters from Indo-Pak history do you recognize? Just give names. I'm gonna give you like 15 seconds. Just put it in chat. And this is not this is an open book test. There are no wrong answers. I mean, there is one wrong answer, but I see Frank. Good job. Good job, Duncan. Yes, Nilma. The last one, I would say, yeah, very peripheral part in the Indo-Pak history, but Lisa. Okay, yes, Frank. Yeah, I wrote Gandhi's full name because a lot of people don't know. They just know him like by one name, like Beyonce or Obama. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so I'm gonna go like I'm going to introduce some main characters of the partition drama. Jawahar Lal Nehru, or he's, I mean, in India he's just called Nehru, but obviously there were more than one Nehru. So Jawahar Lal Nehru, he was one of the leaders of the Indian National Congress. He went to boarding school in Britain and he later studied at Cambridge, and he was secular to a fault, and he wanted to get the British out of India as fast as possible, except one person, and I'll tell you which British person it is in one of the subsequent slides. And in this photo, I chose this photo for a reason. These two white people are very obscure figures. Yeah, one of them was a former president of the U.S. So that's just a trivia question that I had. If anyone knows, they can tell me. If not, then I'm not going to count it against you. Mr. Gandhi, he's probably most well known in the US. He was another leader of the Indian National Congress. He had as they say on Facebook, as millennials say, he had a complicated relationship with the British. He studied law in Britain. He then served the British Raj during the First World War, and then he came to India because previously he was in South Africa. Then he came to India, and then once he came to India, he was constantly agitating against the British. And then he was kind of a religion and politics guy. He liked to mix those. Then this is Mr. Jinnah. This guy is Mr. Jinnah. He was a leader of the All India Muslim League. It was a political party that was formed by the Muslim elites from northern India, or UP, the place where Mughals were ruling. He studied law in Britain. He had a secular lifestyle. He liked ham sandwiches. He married a non-Muslim debutante. And until the 1940s, he was not a separatist, as we would say. He, in the 1940s, after the 1940s, he wanted a separate homeland for Muslims of India. A little word on the All India Muslim League, which the party that he eventually led. It was a party that was formed by elites to basically safeguard their interests from the Hindu majority, because Hindus were in majority at the time in the early 1900s, and eventually, like overall, before the British arrived and after the British, Hindus were always in a majority in India, and Muslims were in a minority. And the elites, when they saw that their interests were not being safeguarded, or they were not as privileged as they were under the Mughals, they eventually formed the All India Muslim League to represent their hopes, ambitions, dreams. Lord Mountbatten, he was the last viceroy of India, and his only achievement was that he was the great grandson of Queen Victoria. You guys are probably all familiar with the Bay of Pigs. Since you're in Miami, during the World War II, Mountbatten led a Bay of Pigs style invasion of an island, and that failed spectacularly, just like the Bay of Pigs. About 2,000 soldiers were taken hostage or prisoners, and then a lot of planes were destroyed. Pilots were killed by the Nazis. So, but I mean, nepotism in the is nothing new for the British monarchy. So he was still promoted as a commander of the Eastern Theater, and by Eastern Theater I mean that the British forces during World War II were fighting against the Japanese. And the Japanese had reached almost till Burma, and that's where the front was. But Mr. Mountbatten was about 2,000 miles away from the front, enjoying the beaches of Sri Lanka. So that was kind of like his leadership style. And he was appointed viceroy in 1947 with the specific task that you have to get a transfer of power from the British to the Indian people, partition or no partition. And then when it came to the time of partition, he gave the job of dividing Punjab and Bengal to a British lawyer who had never set foot in India. So there was that. So why was partition necessary? This is probably the crux of my presentation. The most important thing that I think is it was taxation without representation. Another thing that you guys are probably familiar with. India was a gold mine for the British. Between 1857 and 1947, all billions of dollars worth of money was transferred from India to the British in terms of taxes. But the Indian people did not have representation in how they were governed. And until First World War, when a little bit of Indian nationalism started to emerge, there was no way. There was a Viceroy's Council, but there were no elections that were held to that Viceroy's Council. So most of those people were people from the elite, people that were handpicked by the British to serve on the council, and they only had they didn't have a legislative authority. It was not until 1935 that the first elections took place in India under the British. Another reason why partition took place was the Second World War. During those 6 years, almost 90,000 Indian soldiers fought and died for the British, and much more than this number were wounded. And that was a big toll. The British Empire was it stood on the shoulders of Indian soldiers. And after this much loss and being weakened after the war, Britain had to let go of its colonies. It was almost inevitable. Indian nationalism, as I mentioned, started after the First World War. During the 30s, that was when it was out in full force. And the first elections were held in 1935 before the war, but after the war, 1946, the second elections were held, and the elections kind of like, I would say, they portended partition by most of the Muslim majority areas. The seats were won by Muslim League, and most of the Hindu majority areas, the seats were won by All India Congress. So you could already see a map of how India would be divided in 1946. And then, as I mentioned about the importance of Indian soldiers, there were multiple mutinies in 1946 against the British by the soldiers. So a lot of those things contributed to eventually they led up to a partition. And also by partition, I would like to say that partition of India is essentially a partition of Punjab and Bengal, because all the other states, they stayed the same. And the other big thing that was partition, the princely states were given the option to join either India or Pakistan. And if they had a Muslim majority, they usually went to Pakistan. If they had a Hindu majority, they usually went to India. I'm saying usually because there are obviously, there are exceptions to that rule. So this is I would say I drew up this thing to understand what I'm saying. There was limited political representation after World War I, and then elections held in 1935. Then British position weakens, World War II, second election 46. In February 1947, the British PM says that British will leave India. Partition happens or not, but the British are gone. And then Mountbatten was sent the next month, and he was given the task to basically get out of India by 1948. But somehow, and there are a lot of theories why, he chose that on June 3rd, 1947, he said that India would be partitioned in the middle of August. So this is a map of India and Pakistan and when partition happened. So you could see that this is Punjab and this is East Punjab that went to India, and this line was drawn by that British lawyer. This is West Punjab became Pakistan. Bengal also divided into East and West Bengal. I should also note that Bengal had previously been partitioned temporarily between 1905 and 1911. For 6 years, the British had divided East and West Bengal. So there was some, I would say, like an institutional memory in Bengal that how partition may or may not happen. But Punjab had never really been divided. So a lot of violence happened here, people going on both sides. And then Kashmir, which was a Muslim majority state, the ruler of Kashmir at the time, the prince, he decided to accede to India, despite his population. Hyderabad was a Muslim majority population as well, and the ruler was also Muslim. They decided to, like, it was like a in-between situation. The ruler was not sure. He wanted to join Pakistan, but there was, like, as you could see, there is no direct link between Pakistan and Hyderabad. So it was not feasible. And then he didn't want to be part of India, so he wanted to stay kind of independent, but it was not feasible for long. And in 1948, India actually annexed it by force. So this is another little quiz. How many people do you think were displaced from their homes due to partition, approximately? You could put it in the comments. I'm getting all right answers, by the way. So you guys should read up. Yep. Yes, almost 15 million and that's an estimate. It's not like the records were not really kept well at the time. So this is an estimate, and it's possible that there were more people that were displaced because of partition. About 1 to 2 million people were killed on both sides, and hundreds of thousands of women were raped during this process, as happens in a lot of other wars. This happened there. These are some photos of people who were traveling from one side to the other during partition. These were taken by an American photographer who was there at the time. As you could see, there are some more photos. This is a composite. This is a composite. Now I want to tell you something about myself. My maternal grandfather, he was born in 1939 in Jammu, which is here. This was part of Kashmir. And when he was 9 years old, 8 years old, he and his family moved to Sialkot, which is over here. That's where I was born. And he still, obviously, when they moved, they had papers for their house, their property, whatever. They took them with them. And my maternal grandfather, he, till the end of his life, he longed to go see where he was born, his ancestral house, the streets that he played in. This is my grandfather. He moved to Pakistan, then he went to medical school, then he joined army, and he was in the army for a few years. That's he with my grandmother. And there's my grandfather with probably my mom cutting a cake in his uniform. And until he passed away in 1993, I think my mom tells me that the last thing that he said was, "Do you still have the papers?" Like he was referring to the papers for their house in Jammu. And so till his last breath, he wanted to go back to see where he grew up and all the memories that he had. And this is a rough estimate. The difference between Sialkot and Jammu is about 25 miles. So it's not that much. But there's this big border here between India and Pakistan, and you can't cross that. There is like absolutely no possibility that you can cross that. So that never happened. And my grandfather is obviously one example. There were millions of people on both sides who have had similar stories, who have had to leave family, leave their homes, leave their lives, and move to a new country. Many of them lost their parents or their siblings, sometimes their loved ones, their daughters, their sons. So that's one of the reasons why India and Pakistan cannot get along. There is a lot of unresolved trauma from partition that has never really been addressed nationally on either side. In fact, it has only gotten worse over all these years. It's almost impossible for someone from Pakistan to get a visa to go to India, and vice versa. Obviously, both sides have their problems. There were some times when things were a little more fluid, when people could go, people could visit, but it's getting worse and worse. Another big reason is the use of religious identity politics, something that probably you guys are also familiar with now, unfortunately. That both sides have politicians that use that emphasize their religious identity, and the otherization is really, really bad. When I was growing up as a young child in Sialkot and to middle class parents, going to not very fancy schools, I grew up absolutely hating India and Indians. That's just how it is. That's how everyone around me was. And that it took me a very long time to really understand these things. And then I met some Indians that were visiting Pakistan during one of those brief periods when things were a little easy. And that was like an eye opener for me. I had to learn a lot. Then there's a never-ending saga of the princely states. So Kashmir is still like a sore thumb. We have had 3 wars over Kashmir, and there's no end to sight. People in Kashmir don't want to be with India, but India doesn't want to let go of Kashmir, and it has gone to the UN. Things have dragged on for very long. Also, military adventurism by Pakistan, mostly over Kashmir, but mostly by Pakistan against India. And unfortunately, military is very dominant in Pakistan. They are the biggest political force, even if they don't want to admit to that. And some people say that one of the reasons why the specter of like losing Kashmir or getting in war with India, that's one of the reasons why they hold so much power in Pakistan. So it's a garrison state, some scholars call it. Why do I call it a never-ending partition? Obviously, I mentioned there have been 3 wars over Kashmir, so this is not a problem that has been solved. It's still going on. And then there was another partition between East and West Pakistan. I will not go into too much details, but East Pakistan, which eventually became Bangladesh, it was also another violent separation there in 1971. Then refugee resettlement, that's something that I like to study more. This is refugee from both sides when they were being resettled, at least in Pakistan. That was when the public sector corruption really started on a big scale. And I would also say that some generational wealth that people got from getting allotted places that were not the stuff that they had left behind. So it was not compensatory to that. So that was a big reason where the public sector corruption started. Water is a big problem because most of Pakistan's water actually flows from Kashmir or through Kashmir, so or through India itself. So if thankfully there have never been wars, and there has been a treaty called the Indus Water Treaty, but still water is a problem that's becoming like Pakistan is one of probably top 10 or 15 water scarce countries, so it's only going to get worse. Until 2017, there was not a single monument or museum dedicated to partition on both sides of the border. There is one now in India, but still not in Pakistan. And I feel like while there are different ways to find closure, or at least think about something, at least think about what happened in partition and why. And unfortunately, until 2017, no one really paid attention to at least making a monument or a museum out of that. That's also one of the reasons I call it the Never-Ending Partition. So these are the current prime ministers of India and Pakistan. While they were both born much after partition, their life stories, their political stories are connected to partition. On the left is Imran Khan. He is the Prime Minister of Pakistan. His family got settled in Lahore, in a posh area in Lahore, and their family had agriculture or rural land in India. But when they came to Pakistan, they got urban land, or place that was not really commensurate to what they should have gotten. And one of the people in their family was in the military at the time, so that was how it. I'm not saying that he's a prime minister because of partition. I'm just saying that all the privilege that he has, a lot of that came from that allotment that was done wrongfully. And Mr. Modi on the right, he is a prime minister of India. He was born in India, doesn't have any direct partition links that I know of, but when he was running for the chief minister of Gujarat state, a lot of people who supported him, wealthy people, many of them had migrated from Sindh, so another state in Pakistan. So he has an indirect link to partition as well. Obviously, I have to mention the Trail of Tears. Partition of India was a massive event in the history in human history, but that was not the only event when there was displacement on a big scale. The Trail of Tears is another example that happened in the US. And then similar to that is another displacement happened from the west coast of Africa to the US. You guys are familiar with the 1619 project. And then there are some suggested readings where you could read more about this. All of these, I think I've actually read all of these. So I can go through like a little bit, like I'll give like one line introduction. So the long partition is about most of what I said and how partition actually went on. So 1947 was not a cut point where like everything got cut off, like India and Pakistan were cut off. The movement of people eventually happened until into the 50s, like starting in 47 went on to the 50s, and then it stopped around 65 when the first war happened. The Pakistan paradox is it talks about the Muslim elite that formed Muslim League, and then how some of those contradictions that were present at the time eventually manifested themselves when Pakistan was created and in politics of Pakistan. Freedom of Midnight is a very interesting book about partition and the horrors of partition itself. Midnight's Furies also similarly, it's a relatively newer book about partition and the horrors that happened. Urvashi Batalia's book, this is about women who were raped during 1947. So she traced some of those women on both sides of the border, and she heard their stories, and this book is about that. Train to Pakistan, it's also about partition from Pushwant Singh. This is also a very famous book. Indian Summer, it talks about some of the personalities that I mentioned, so Nehru and Mountbatten. So it's very interesting. I like that. It's also a recent book. Princely Affair is about the princely states that I mentioned about. So it goes through the major states and what were their politics before and after partition, how were the rulers, the particulars of the rulers. This is on that. And I mentioned that Nehru wanted to expel everyone except one person. So, sorry, let me just go back to, so this is Edwina Mountbatten. She was Mountbatten's wife, and this is Nehru. So they had a complicated relationship, and he was apparently infatuated with her, and she was probably also, I'm not sure, like there's, for Alex von Tunzelmann's book I would say it's half of that is based on just this. So, and I would like to take any questions.
This is not really a question, but I'm just, when we talk about the amount of women who were raped, I'm also thinking that men probably were raped, and that we still document history sometimes not acknowledging that piece. It was just a comment.
Yeah, I would believe that happened as well. And the reason I would mention women more than men is because rape has been used because rape is about power, and then rape has been used as an instrument of power during wars before partition, obviously, and after partition. Anywhere in the world, if you see mass, like wherever there's a major war, you see rape. Because it's done usually by people who are the conquerors, the winners, or the more powerful people. So that's why I mentioned it specifically.
Abdul, I'd like to make a comment because I started reading. I warned you that I was going to start reading this book called "The Social Background of Indian Nationalism" by A.R. Desai. And I was just trying to find out, like, why did the two split? Because there's just so many Muslims still in India, and it just didn't make any sense to me at all, having been born in India. So, and also this whole series that we're starting is to try to find out, are there any bits and pieces that we can gather from specific historical and geographical examples of colonialism, and what are the ways in which people ruled using techniques for resource grabbing, I guess, for the capitalist system, which is a short way of saying colonialism. I found I would like to read something out, maybe, because, you know, in India there was just so many political movements, and many were religious oriented, and that's some sort of the Achilles heel perhaps of South Asia, is that they felt that politics had to be attached to these religious ideas just as a counter position against Western thought, because they were the invaders. So that was an idea that we have to reach into our own background to find the grist for our own independence. So, you know, I'm just trying to like pull through all of this stuff, and thank you for your contribution. It really helped to sink the penny into the piggy bank. But yeah, I just wanted to read something that maybe helped me understand that how the British were, you know, setting up, although the Muslims and the Hindus had their own indigenous want to create their own independent political organizations, the rulers, the British, thought that that was quite convenient to keep those populations separated, so the whole divide and rule tactic. So I'm just reading from page 398 of this book, specifically the Morley-Minto reforms of 1909 introduced the system of separate electorates and representation for the Indian Muslims. So it's like they're already starting to communalize a population. They're not trying to make the population as a secular population. They're sort of encouraging those people who are basing their politics on communalism, i.e. on religious politics. So it says the British government introduced the communal principle in the constitutional machinery of the Indian state as early as 1909. And just in the, I don't want to belabor it too much, but the next page says a number of British statesmen held the view that the policy of counterpoise, or balancing one class or community against another, was absolutely vital for the preservation of the British paramountcy in India. So this whole book sort of goes through all the different political movements, and there's just a dizzying variety of availability of where India could have gone had it not been for the meddling of the British. I mean, in a way, the British contributed by bringing capitalism and getting rid of those horribly backward village communities that were self-sufficient, but yet they did not allow that secular movement to go forward naturally as it might have if the Indians were left alone. So that's the point I wanted to make. Thank you. Any questions for Abdul, or any comments from your own background in colonialism? It could be from another country or anything at all.
Frank has a question.
But I saw Duncan motioning before, so I'm happy to wait.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Well, a real gentleman is never told that he is one, but I really like the presentation and the maps. One surprise for me was that Gujarat seemed to have been very Muslim once upon a time, right? And especially when you consider the rise of Modi and all that he has done over the past 20 years, if not more, it's all the more surprising. I know this story from literature, and I've only seen the odd documentary or so, literature and film, and I really like the fact that you showed it through politics and geopolitics in particular in order to explain how things have gone. But I would say the reason, when I once taught as a South Asian literature course, I called it Partition and After, because as far as I was concerned, it's the biggest event and the one that continues to reverberate till today. You began with the question of your Lithuanian friend, and until Modi appeared as the premier of India, I would have thought of that as the solution too. Unification, that it would possibly have been beneficial for especially the Muslims in India to be part of a greater whole. Now I don't know that I have any hope at all.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like once it was done, it was really hard to really take them back, because of politics, yes, but also memories. Like a lot of people in Pakistan and India now, they have no memory of India and Pakistan being together ever before that. So they have also gone different ways, economically, socially. The social scene in Pakistan, outside of a few circles in big cities, is still very religious and primitive compared to India, let's just say. The middle classes are conservative everywhere, but obviously conservative in their own ways in India and Pakistan, which is divergent. And the militaries, at least the Pakistan military, would never want to be absorbed in India. And for the Muslims of India, it's I feel for them. I mean, I don't know what to say that would be like which way they could go that would be helpful for them. like, would there be a good, like even before Modi, under Congress governments, religion has been creeping into Indian politics for a very long time. Because there are, like I said, there is the Nehru strain, and then there's a Gandhi strain. Obviously, there are also very smaller strains, but there is definitely a Hindu majoritarian strain in Indian politics that has been there, and Congress used it when they wanted to, but they played secular for a very long time. One of the, I would say, galvanizing moments in my short existence in this world, or the time when I got really, really angry at India, was in 1992. It was, I believe, the 5th of December. That's when a historical mosque in the UP area called the Babri Masjid, it was demolished by a mob led by someone who eventually became, I believe, either the president or one of the major ministers under a BJP government. And that at that time it was a Congress rule over India. So that was happening under Congress. So it was, I don't see how it would work, even like if they had, because Pakistan has had military dictatorships and like a lot of problems. India has always had a democracy, however like fractured or discohesive it has been. So politically, it would be really hard for these two to just be like one state. That's just my thoughts.
If I may just supplement, I suppose part of what I was thinking though is that within Pakistan, there's the Shia minority, which is often under attack, although Jinnah himself had been one. And I suppose my hope had been that under one larger umbrella, there would be less of the militarism, there would be less of the politicization of religious identity, and yeah, it would be a safer space for certain populations or communities.
Yeah, Pakistan has a horrible record of treating its minorities. I mean, India has the same. So eventually, even if they're separate, they sometimes act the same way. If you're a minority in Pakistan or India, your life is miserable. And I want to circle back a little bit on one of your points about fiction. I feel like understanding partition is the best way to understand partition is through fiction. Unfortunately, some of the best fiction on India and Pakistan partition is written in local languages. So somehow it has either not been translated or not translated as well in English. But a lot of great works in Urdu and Punjabi and Hindi. So yes, Khamosh Pani is it's a very interesting film. I've watched it in Pakistan. The lady who was pretending to be someone else for so long.
Before Duncan jumps in, I wanted to throw in, since we're on film, I just saw a Bollywood film that was very cute, a comedy called Sardar Ka Grandson. Have you seen that, Abdul? It's about the woman is in Amritsar or whatever. The grandmother has left, her house is in Pakistan and she's living in India. So the grandson goes to Pakistan to actually move her house back to India across the border. It's quite ridiculous and lovely. So recommended if you like Bollywood. Sardar Ka Grandson. All right. Duncan?
Well, I found this very interesting, like the maps and everything. I really didn't have a handle on. I've seen political maps of India and geographical maps, but not the historical maps and ethnic. So I really like that part of your presentation, and thanks for bringing all this up. I've known personally probably about 24 Pakistanis and about 200 Indians. I'm sorry, about 24 Indians too. And on a personal level, I mean, they're all very nice people. They're scientists, and I've worked with them and, you know, seen them in congresses. And sat for dinner with him, and like that. And so with the people, I think everything's quite equal. I don't say I'd like one group better than the other. When I think of politically, I've always had a hard time understanding Pakistan. They're homogeneous with regard to religion, and they tend to be military and under dictators, and not democratic. And I wondered how much that could have been due to the mogul, and they're more mogul and they're more mountainous, and whether there are other reasons, besides the Islam. With India, and I'd always seen it as diverse and very productive, and it's the world's largest democracy in the world. You have a pharmaceutical, the Indians have a pharmaceutical industry. I mean, it's a big deal. The advice I get on this computer that I'm speaking through with when it goes on the fritz through Dell is Indian, so I speak with them. I can see how the India is really raising its level of education and economics. I mean, through this type of commerce. And I've been interested in the different religions that you have in India, the Hindu and the Buddhist and the Muslim, and then I guess there are other ones too. So I'm wondering, and these are just some things I've thrown out. I'm wondering what you could add to some of that, because I'm not too interested in who did what to whom, because I think that's kind of water over the dam. But going forward, is there what could Pakistan do for itself that would make it into a more liberal democracy? And what are challenges to India to become a world leader?
For Pakistan, you're right in saying that while they appear to be homogenous, but there are a lot of fractures in Pakistan, and some of that is a Mughal hangover, but not as much. Some of that is obviously, it has evolved over time. There is a very nice book called The Army and Democracy. It traces how India and Pakistan's militaries have basically diverged since partition. It was the same, I mean, they were part of the same army before partition, but it has gone two ways. And part of that was because of the political coup-proofing that was done by Nehru. Initially, he was the first prime minister, and there were a lot of other steps. I mean, it's a whole book. I can only give you a brief summary of that. Other than as to how Pakistan can, I really, I endorse your point that it's hard to understand Pakistan. I was born there, have been studying it. I still don't understand it well. But as far as what could possibly happen to get Pakistan on a better footing for the rest of the world and for India, I feel like, but I don't see, like, I used to be a teacher in Pakistan. I used to teach in medical schools, and I was like, the indoctrination is so it's not perfect, but the grip is so firm on young minds that there is not a lot of opportunity for them to go out just of their country, of their cities. A lot of people have never been to a different state in Pakistan, and they don't have good exposure to ideas from the outside. A lot of the ideas from the outside come in, let's say, English and Urdu, which is the national language, or the regional languages. There is not a lot of even like secular ideas. Let's say a lot of the let's say a science book, it's hard to translate that in Urdu. And then even if you study your science, let's say in Urdu, when you go to work somewhere, they will want to know everything in English. So there is a language barrier in that as well. But not to say that Urdu does not have secular literature. Some of the initial books that, while I used to be religious when my transformation was happening, some of the first books that I read were in Urdu. So there is definitely literature available if someone is willing to challenge the presumptions of what is happening in Pakistan. But it is hard to challenge the majority. It's oppressive, and like I left. Like I could not stay there and be the person who I am, because there's very little opportunity. I mean, I might have grown professionally as a doctor, yes, but at what cost? Like I could not have my views. I could not tell people that I'm not religious, or I think religious is bullshit. I could have been killed for saying those things. I used to write for newspapers, even for English, which is not like, not a lot of people read English newspapers in Pakistan. But even then, I kind of got, some word got back to me that I should not write things that I was writing. And I wasn't writing anything blasphemous as such. I was merely writing things that were maybe a little critical of the military, maybe a little critical of the mullahs or whatever. So that was one thing. For India, I feel like economically and technologically, they are probably going to be one of the superpowers very soon. But culturally, I don't know. I'm still ambivalent about. I don't know if Indian culture, other than food, I mean, other than that, is there a way that Indian culture can move beyond its roots, and can it become truly global? I don't know about that. Just if you want to compare technicians, that's in that space, India is going to be ahead of everybody else. So those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's the picture I had. There's a lot of brain power in India, and it's unfettered. I mean, maybe a lot of it's in scavenging food to keep body and soul together, but it's got a democracy and elections and then there's hope and it's so many people that they, I mean, in there that intelligence, those individual intelligences are communicating with each other all the time. I'm not sure with Pakistan is the mosque what you have to go to it. You can just be quiet about it and not believe it and but you just can't say it publicly wrong.
I mean, you can like, there are a lot of people there who don't go to the mosque, who almost never pray, but you can't really there is a time, like even like casual encounters, like if you're working at an office, your coworkers are going to be curious as to, oh, there is time for like Friday prayers. Friday prayers are a big thing in Pakistan. So everything shuts down, almost everything shuts down, and many people go for Friday prayers. A lot of people don't go. If you don't go, people at your work may be asking, oh, I didn't go for Friday prayers. Did you have anything urgent or whatever? And there's not a lot of concept of privacy in Pakistan. So there is only if you don't like talk to anyone ever, then you can obviously be safe. But if you live in a society, you have your parents or siblings or whatever, and they don't believe in all these things, then it becomes difficult. Like you have pressure from all over. Everyone is hammering just one message. It's the same thing over and over and over again. So it's frustrating. It's frustrating to be a minority, any kind of minority in Pakistan, not just someone who's an atheist.
And just be my last question, and then I'll blank screen. Did Islam come to Pakistan over the mountains, or did it come up from the Indian Ocean?
So originally it came,
Islam, I think.
Originally it came through the ocean, in the Indian Ocean. But the Mughals and conquerors before them came through the mountains. So Frank was saying about Gujarat. So Gujarat or areas around Gujarat, that was probably the first place where Muslim traders came in the 7th or the 8th century. And then some part of Sindh, they came in the 8th century. But after that, in the 10th, 11th, and 12th centuries, when conquerors from the Central Asia, they came through the mountains. And I would say a lot of people, and this is also something also random. In Pakistan, a lot of people think that their ancestors were from, they were Arabs, which is absolutely not true. And that is sort of like a source of pride. Oh, they add Sayyid to their name, which means that your ancestors were Arab. But 99.9% of those people, their ancestors converted from Hinduism or Sikhism or whatever to Islam. So it's just a fake binary. Frank?
Yeah, thanks. I hope you can hear me all right.
Yes.
I suppose one question was, how big is the Christian minority, the Sikh minority, and whether apostasy is punishable by death or in any way punishable?
The Christian minority, I would say, well, Pakistan's population is close to 2400 million. And the Christians are maybe like 1% of it. And there are a few Hindus, maybe another 1% of it. Sikhs, very small, like not even a person. They're very, very small Sikh minority. And then we also have some people who are like anywhere else in the world, they would be considered Muslims, but they're kind of like a Mormon sect. They're known as Ahmadis. Qadianis or Ahmadis, those are also in very small number, but they live in like one ghetto in Punjab, and it's if you announce yourself as an Ahmadi in a crowded square in Pakistan, there is a very high likelihood that you would be killed just for being that. Yes. And apostasy, while technically the religious law says that it is punishable by death, but Pakistan doesn't have religious law in itself. Yes, on surface it's not, but in people's minds it is. Like they think that it is actually ruled by religious law, which is not true. But you can't really explain the intricacies of constitutionalism to a mob. So, and that happens a lot. Like Christians, and blasphemy is a bigger problem, like whatever is called blasphemy. A lot of people have been killed just for being accused of blasphemy. There was a very famous case of a Christian, poor Christian woman who was accused of blasphemy. She probably never said that, but her name was Askia Bibi, as Frank said. She was in jail for almost a decade until she was released, and then she's in Canada now. And what my transformation happened when the sitting governor of Punjab at the time went to see Askia Bibi in jail. And he said that this accusation is not right and that he would fight for this woman. And then he was killed by his own police guard. That was when I first started questioning the whole religion, fundamentalism, all of those things. That was when I broke. So this is another story. Someone asked, what are the forces possibly pushing for secularism? I joke that there are 72 secular people in Pakistan. I know all of them. And I would say maybe there are 170, but I still know a lot of them, because there's a very, very tiny circle of people who have access to, who have been educated abroad and who have ideas that are secular in nature and who would like to see Pakistan as not the shithole that it is right now. Yes, I said it. But there are no political parties. There are political parties that have a little bit of a secular agenda, but when those parties when they come to power, they do not really practice secularism. or they do not practice religion and state, because somehow it has become, both religion and militarism has become so pervasive that it doesn't matter which political party you are. When you are in power, you are held hostage to them. I think 2017 is when there was, so the person who killed the governor of the province, he was hanged to death in 2017. So there was a whole movement just to sort of support that guy. And they went on the streets, they blocked the Capitol for about, I don't know, a week or so. And like that's a whole political movement now. So it's going the opposite way. Instead of becoming better, there are more reactionary religious political movements. And that party actually competed for the first time in elections in 2018, and it came, I would say, third or fourth in a lot of places. So it's kind of like a religious Tea Party that started. Their only political issue is blasphemy, and that's it. Like that's all they care about. Hi Sue, good to see you. We have a British person with us, and I'm not going to blame her for all the ills that happened. So just so you guys know.
Hi, Abdul. I have to apologize for coming in late, but it's being recorded, so I'll catch up. Thanks.
Told you he was funny.
Yeah, The Reluctant Fundamentalist is the book better than the movie. I've seen the movie. Other than Riz Ahmed, I mean, the movie is kind of meh. The book is a little better on that account.
If you hadn't said shithole, I probably wouldn't have thought of it. But, you know, at one point, the protagonist says, Pakistan used to be so far ahead of the Philippines. How is it that we have fallen behind as a country? You know, the Philippines is now one of the Asian tigers.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of countries didn't even exist when Pakistan was in a better shape in the 60s. Like South Korea was not where it is now. Philippines or other countries in the Far East, they were still growing, and Pakistan was technologically in a good space in the 60s. But then a lot of the Pakistan's good phases have been due to US support. So in the 60s, there was Pakistan's military wanted to be Cold Warriors. So they got a lot of military support that way. And then in the 80s, the Afghan war, they got money that way. In 2011 and after, we got money that way. So that has been like the peaks of Pakistan's economic progress, because we don't have a lot of industrialization or a lot of good things to export. We unfortunately don't have a knowledge economy. When India had a chance in the early 90s to, as Duncan was saying earlier, to have like call centers or people who had some kind of computer skills to go ahead, Pakistan had that chance as well. It's not that India had India was not the only country in that space, but Pakistan lost it. And look where we are now. Someone said about Urdu spoken of Hindustani. It's if I was an Urdu nationalist, I would be offended, but I'm not an Urdu nationalist. So I would say it's pretty much the same language. Urdu has about 70 to 80% Sanskrit roots, and the rest come from Arabic, Farsi, Turkish. I went to Turkey for the first time, I think 2013, and I was like, wow, some of these words are the same in Urdu. So obviously they came from Turkish too. Does Pakistan benefit as a South Asian military post for the outpost for the US? I don't think anyone ever benefits from being an outpost for the US, unfortunately. And the problem with that is that there is no indigenous quest for like advancement. Like if you're getting money from abroad for whatever reason, then why would you appropriately tax your people? Why would you develop industry? Why would you focus on like educating your people? So it has been a net negative for Pakistan. But yeah, I guess I gotta go back to my the kidney that I'm gonna look at now. The poppy trade, I mean, it started in the 70s, late 70s with the Afghan war, and I don't think, I mean, Pakistan was one of the places where it was sent as, but it was not like an Amazon fulfillment center type of place. It was like somewhere where it went through. It went through there, but we didn't make any money out of it. Pomegranates, I would say more like mangoes. Pakistani mangoes are pretty popular. I don't know if any of you guys have had it. Since the US, a lot of mangoes are coming from Mexico and Guatemala, but
And
Pakistani
if
mangoes.
you're Cuban, your aunt, uncles, and grandparents' backyards.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there's some sports goods that they manufacture, some other things, leather, a lot of leather stuff, but not really bigger things, that not a lot of finished product, a lot of raw material, yes, but not finished products. And a lot of, and it is sometimes I'm like, I see that sometimes you would see that a lot of jeans are made in Pakistan, but no one really bothers to read the label where it says made in Pakistan. And I also know that some companies get their stuff manufactured in Pakistan, then that stuff goes to Germany and it's labeled as made in Germany, because those companies don't want made in Pakistan or on their products. So
I know Sue had